You've heard it 1,000 times. The customer's always right. But let's be honest, anyone who's worked with the public knows that that's just not true. Today, I want to talk about why that's not true and how believing it and supporting it can actually hurt a business and their customers and their employees. Guaranteed. You've probably dealt with someone who was just demanding the impossible, or you've watched a manager give in to a customer like that just to avoid conflict. Let's talk about where this phrase came from, what it really meant, and why it's so misunderstood today. Originally, the customer is always right didn't mean that customers could make unreasonable demands or treat people with disrespect. It meant that businesses should pay attention to what customers want. If someone wants blue shirts, if a lot of people want blue shirts, well, then the business should order blue shirts and stock a lot of blue shirts. If customers want a lot of simple products and not fancy products, well, then you stock simple products. It was more about customer preferences and not about customer behavior. Let's be real. Sometimes customers want the rules to not apply to them. They want refunds for things that they've damaged. They blame the workers for the company's policies, or they demand discounts just because they ask for one. That is not being right. That's being entitled. For anyone who's watching that thinks the customer should always be right, think again. Customers can be rude and disrespectful for no reason. Customers can bully the employees, especially the younger ones, who really just want to do a good job and don't want to upset anybody, or they haven't had enough life experience to learn how to handle bullies. Remember, that cashier is somebody's daughter, or that waitress could be somebody's mother. That customer service rep could be working 2 jobs just to make ends meet. They're human beings. They have feelings. Somewhere along the way, we forgot about that. There's a difference between giving good service and being someone's punching bag. Years ago, I was a manager of restaurants at a casino in South Mississippi on the Gulf Coast. And I had an incident with one of my workers. She came running into the kitchen crying. And turns out we had a customer who was very racist, and the worker was an African-American girl and the customer was white. And she wanted dessert. And in the way the buffet was set up, it was like a horseshoe, and in the middle of the horseshoe was the desserts. And this customer came up and they would point at what they wanted and the worker would get it for them. And she told this worker that she didn't want her near her food, that she was a dirty N-word. And I want you to understand, in a casino environment, of all environments, they think the customer is always right, pretty much, because they're spending their money there and they want their money. And in this situation, it didn't matter to me if she was a high roller. You don't treat a person like that. So I went out and I had to handle that customer, and I called security and they escorted her off property. Now, that doesn't happen a lot at a casino, but in that situation, I felt very justified to have that done, and I was supported by my upper management, because you just can't have that in a situation, in any environment. That shouldn't happen, but definitely not in that situation. And that, to me, is a perfect example. I mean, the perfect example of how a customer is not always right. That was just not called for. I've also seen people snap for no reason, really, for something like an expired coupon or a long line or maybe an item that's out of stock. And when that happens, I always think, is that the real problem, or is there something deeper going on here? Because most of the time, it doesn't cost anything to be kind. Being a paying customer does not make someone superior. Character shows up in how we treat people who serve us. I think we've forgotten patience And we've confused convenience with control. And we really need to get back to that. We've gotten to a point where we think convenience means perfection, that we're due perfection. When businesses reward this behavior, it is actually teaching people to keep doing it. When companies believe the customer is always right, the good employees burn out and quit. Morale drops. Good workers stop caring, and respect disappears. Prices go up to cover constant refunds and complaints. And the irony is that the good customers, the reasonable ones, end up paying the price. A better way of thinking of it is the customer always deserves respect, and so do the employees. Good businesses know the goal isn't to please every customer. It's to build a good customer base with solid respect, to build trust, fairness, consistency. Sometimes that means saying, no, we can't do that, or no, that's against our policy, or no, that's not how that works. And that's okay. Now, as a cashier in my current little part-time job, I still see it happening. I've said it before in a different video. An example would be a customer coming up to the gas pump, wanting you to turn it on, and them not paying first. And that's just not how things are done anymore. You have to pay before the pump will come on. But little things like that, it shows. They get upset and their character shows. So no, the customer is not always right. But the best businesses listen and treat their customers fairly and treat their employees fairly. And they stand by their employees. And when employees feel understood and treated fairly and backed by their management, the customers are going to get better service anyway. It's funny how that works. If you've ever dealt with a customer service issue like what I'm talking about, I would love to hear about it. Tell me down in the comments. I know you've got stories. If we want our culture to improve, then it starts with how we treat each other every day, in the small moments as well as the large moments. The customer is not always right, but we can always choose to be kind, and that is what matters most. So if you've ever been the frustrated cashier who's been treated poorly by a customer, I'd love to hear about it. Or if you've ever been the frustrated customer, I'd like to hear your experiences too. Maybe there's something that you can think about coming from this video. Let's bring respect back. And if you like real life, down-to-earth conversations like this one, please like and subscribe, because I have many. And I'll see you in the next one. Have a great day. God bless.